Good Voch, Shavua Tov. May we all be blessed with a good week. How was your Shabbos? How are you doing? Let me get the video in front of me. Let me just mention immediately, I came out of Shabbos. I wasn't even aware until I received a message that apparently there was an explosion in downtown LA. We weren't even aware of it where we live, so we're fine. But I did read that that while the fire is under control, thank God, it was a big fire, several explosions, 230 firefighters were called to the scene in downtown LA. And I believe some firefighters were injured. Let us pray it was not serious. And I believe that at last I heard the fire is under control. So may we only hear good news and no further reports of injuries. And thank you to everybody who inquired about us. We are safe. Okay, let me just get the YouTube in front of me. Okay, there we go. All right, Deborah Hazelwood is in from Florida. Who is with us on a Saturday night? Sandy McMurray from Michigan, Paul Michael from Arkansas, Helena Hamila from Finland. Welcome to the show, Helena. Sharon Frant Brooks says Shavua Tov from beautiful Lebanon, New Jersey. Sandy McMurray, Pauline Michael, and Eliyahu Yaakov Goldberg. How are you, my dear friends? May we only hear good news. Okay, so we have a complex page tonight, and that's a good time to take a little digression. Tonight's going to be fantastic. We're going to have a Meet the Mensch session. We did that once before, and we met Rabbi Zera and heard a bit about his life story. And tonight we're going to meet one of the great personalities of the Talmud, Rabbi Yochanan. So let's set the scene and see why it is that we're going to go meet Rabbi Yochanan on this night. Oh my goodness, Claudio Arato in the house. Welcome, Claudio, from British Columbia, Canada, in Vancouver. Okay, so we are holding on page 71, Daf 71, of a tractate Shabbos, the second volume of the Talmud. We're in chapter 7, and we're still exploring the commentary, the Gemaras, on the first Mishnah of chapter 7. And this has to do with people who had a lapse of awareness, right? Either they didn't even know what Shabbos was, and then they learned, or they knew what Shabbos was, but they didn't know that it was Shabbos. In other words, they knew what Shabbos is and that Jews are not supposed to work on Shabbos, but they lost track of the calendar, and so they didn't know it was Shabbos when they performed forbidden labors. And we learned that when that happens, a person brings one sin offering for all the unwitting transgressions that happen on the Shabbat, where he just didn't know it was Shabbat. Or there's the case of a person who didn't know that a particular labor was forbidden. He knew what Shabbos is, he knew that it applied to him, he knew that it was Shabbos, but he didn't know that he's not allowed to write on Shabbos or to plant on Shabbos, to gather on Shabbos, to transport something, to carry, etc. And in the last case, he brings a chatas, a sin offering, for each category of work that he violated in an unwitting fashion. He didn't mean to do it. He wouldn't have done it if he knew that the labor was prohibited on Shabbos. That's an unwitting transgression, and that's why he brings the sin offering. If he knew it was Shabbos, he knew he wasn't supposed to do it, and he did it anyway, that would be an intentional violation, and the punishment for that is at the hands of heaven, and it's called kares, or excision, generally thought of to mean an early death when enough of these kinds of transgressions pile up. The opportunity to bring the sin offering is a gift. It's a gift from God that we could bring an offering and atone for ourselves. Now that we live in a time where there's no temple, we can't bring a sin offering, and it is our prayer and our commitment to make a teshuvah, to make an atonement, that takes the place of bringing the sin offering. Also giving tzedakah, giving money to charity, helps us atone for our unwitting transgressions. That's what we've been studying, and now we come to the case of a lapse of awareness in which a person commits various transgressions. We start in the subject of Shabbos, right, that he performed several forbidden labors on the same Shabbos, and then later becomes aware that he shouldn't have done that. And we're going to drill down into a dispute between Rabbi Yochanan and his dear friend and debate partner, his learning partner, with whom they argued all the time, but in a very passionate but loving way, his partner Reish Lakish. And they're going to argue about a related kind of transgression, not that somebody performed various forbidden labors, multiple forbidden labors on one or more Shabbos that weren't supposed to do, but an analogous case of eating cheilev. So cheilev is a forbidden fat. There's a part of an animal. This pertains to animals that may be offered as sacrifices. So a cow, a sheep, a goat, the kinds of animals that are brought in the temple. There are kosher animals that we may eat if they're slaughtered in a kosher fashion, but which still are not brought as offerings in the temple. So for example, a deer. A deer is a kosher animal if it's slaughtered properly, but we don't offer one on the altar in the temple. For the animals that may be brought, there are parts of the animal, even if it was not brought as an offering, it's just that type of animal, but it was simply slaughtered for people to eat and enjoy, just to have the food. There are still parts of that animal which are called the forbidden fats, which we don't eat. So kosher meat omits certain parts of the cow. That's why, if you're a person who doesn't keep kosher and then you start keeping kosher, there's going to be certain steaks that you could eat before that you can no longer eat. You could eat cow before and you could eat cow after you start keeping kosher, but there are parts of the cow that you are not permitted to eat. So the cheilev is one of those parts of the cow or sheep or goat that you are not permitted to eat. So what if there's a person who ate 2 pieces of the forbidden fat, 2 pieces of cheilev, in one lapse of awareness, and then he became aware that about the first transgression. So there was a lapse of awareness. He didn't know that he's not allowed to eat that, or he didn't know that the food that he was eating was that forbidden fat. So he didn't know, he was not going to eat that if he knew it was forbidden. He just didn't know that it's not allowed, or he didn't know that that piece was cheilev. In either case, it happened twice in the same lapse of awareness. Then he realizes that the first thing that he ate was cheilev, and therefore he's now liable to bring the chatas, the sin offering. And then a little later, he becomes aware that in that same lapse of awareness, the second piece of meat was a forbidden fat, and he was also not allowed to eat that. So he ate both pieces in the same lapse of awareness, but he realized about the first piece at one moment and then later realized about the second piece, right? The 2 things were eaten separately but in the same lapse of awareness, and the realizations that he had eaten something forbidden were separate. They didn't happen at the same moment. So for this case, Rabbi Yochanan says you bring 2 sin offerings, and his friend and partner in dispute said, Reish Lakish says you bring 1 chatas, 1 sin offering for both forbidden pieces. Now, the sages who are the Amoraim, the later rabbis who are sort of arguing, well, what exactly was the dispute between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish? How do we understand which one the law follows? Does the law follow Rabbi Yochanan? And when we have 2 realizations about 2 pieces that we're eating in the same lapse of awareness, we bring 2 sin offerings, or Reish Lakish says we bring 1 sin offering for both pieces, even though we realized at separate times that the first piece was forbidden and then the second piece was forbidden. What is between them? What are they actually arguing about? And who does the law follow? And one way to understand it, somebody suggests that, well, maybe what happened was he realized the first piece was forbidden, and then he designated in his mind which animal from his farm he's going to bring as the sin offering. And then he learned that the second piece was also forbidden. And so it's in that case that Rabbi Yochanan says, since he already designated his sin offering, it's only going to cover the first transgression. It won't cover the second transgression, and that's why he needs two sin offerings. Whereas Reish Lakish says, the fact that he designated after he realized the first one and before he realized that the second one was forbidden doesn't stop that sin offering when he finally brings it from expiating his guilt for both transgressions. Or perhaps what is between them is that he realized that the first piece was forbidden, he actually designated and brought the sin offering, and then realized that in that same lapse of awareness, he had eaten two pieces, and he hadn't atoned for the second one, and so now he has to bring a second sin offering. Or perhaps Reish Lakish is saying, even though he already brought his sin offering, since it was covering what happened in that one lapse of awareness, it would cover both. And that is what's between them. So that's three different ways to understand it, right? He just realized at two different times, didn't do anything about it. He realized that he brought the first sin offering, that he ate something forbidden and designated an animal to be the sin offering, and then realized he did it again in that same lapse. Or he realized that the first piece was forbidden, he designated an animal, he brought the sin offering to the temple, and then he realized that he ate a second piece in that same lapse of awareness. It's three different ways to understand it. And so in which case does Rabbi Yochanan say he needs two sin offerings? In which case does Reish Lakish say one sin offering will do? And whom does the law follow? So we're going to come back to the answer of that question after we learn who was Rabbi Yochanan. And if you're tuning in now, you're going to be so happy. If you're with us, if you're watching this class now tonight, you're going to learn about one of the great, great people in Jewish history. Who was Rabbi Yochanan? Rabbi Yochanan was an Amora, meaning he was of the generation of sages who followed the publication of the Mishnah, the first writing down of the oral law. That first generation of rabbis who participated in figuring out, bringing the oral law to the place where it had to be written down because the Roman persecution was so severe. The people before the Mishnah was set down, they are called a Tana, singular, or Tanaim, plural. The next several generations were called Amoraim. These were the ones who were commenting on the Mishnah, and that would happen for about the next 300 years. The Mishnah set down about 200, the year 200 of the Common Era. The Talmud completed, or the Gemara completed, around the year 500. This refers to the Babylonian Talmud. But there were Amoraim working both in Israel and in Babylonia. Rabbi Yochanan was in Israel. His learning and his teaching and his residence were all in Israel. He's of the first generation of Amoraim because he himself was a student of Rebbe. That's Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the leader of the Sanhedrin at that time, and the man responsible for having the Mishnah written down. They never wanted to do it. The oral tradition was supposed to remain an oral tradition, but the Roman persecution was so severe that so many Torah scholars were being killed, and they thought that it would be lost. And to prevent it from being lost, they wrote it down. But they wrote it down in such a coded way that really you have to study the tradition in order to understand what the Mishnah is saying. At any rate, Rebbe was a great, great leader, and Rabbi Yochanan studied in his academy in the north of Israel. Rabbi Yochanan came from the north of Israel. His family was from Tzipori and Tiberias in the north. And he grew into such a prominent and important Torah scholar that his teachings are literally all over the Talmud. There is hardly a passage in the entire Talmud that doesn't mention Rabbi Yochanan or one of his students who were directly influenced by him. And in addition, as we will see, the Jerusalem Talmud is largely attributed to him. He was the one who began the project of creating the Jerusalem Talmud. He led that for an astonishingly long time. As we'll see, he was the head of the yeshiva in Tiberias for 80 years. Can you imagine? He was the principal of the school for 80 years. And the project of creating the Jerusalem Talmud was largely begun by him, continued by his students. Unfortunately, the Roman persecution eventually became so severe that the Jerusalem Talmud was not completed. Nevertheless, Rabbi Yochanan's influence all over the Talmudic world, and even in Babylonia, where he never personally set foot, but his teachings traveled and permeated all Jewish communities in Babylonia. So let's learn more about him personally. Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Yochanan was orphaned almost immediately that he was born. His father died when his mother was pregnant, and then his mother died in childbirth when he was born. Tragic, tragic story. But consistent with his incredibly upbeat and positive personality, he would eventually, when he was this great Torah leader, comment about the fact that he was orphaned. As soon as he was born, his parents were gone. He actually said about that, where is the teaching? Happy is one who never saw his parents, since it is almost impossible to honor one's parents properly, and a child will inevitably be punished on account of his failing to treat them properly. Now, he's saying to people, don't feel bad for me that I never met my parents, but it's a great teaching. That is how difficult it is to properly honor our parents, right? And probably we start blowing it when we're teenagers and we're rude, and we spend the rest of our lives trying to make up for that and to fulfill that fifth commandment and to honor our parents properly. So that's the importance of this teaching, right? That Rabbi Yochanan said, well, at least I never fell short in honoring my parents because I wasn't given that opportunity. Most people do fall short. So let us be inspired by that teaching to do better and call our parents regularly and serve them and respect them and do what we can for them. It is said that when his mother was pregnant with him, she smelled the aroma of food on Yom Kippur and developed a craving for food on Yom Kippur. Now, at that time, it was understood, and even today, if a pregnant woman has such a strong craving for food that it is like becoming a real problem for her, so she can eat on Yom Kippur, right? It's considered a matter of life and death, so she has to eat because the craving is so strong, so she should eat. But at that time, his mother was having that kind of a craving, and she didn't want to give in to it. So she sent word to Rebbe, the head of the academy, to say, can I eat? Should I eat? What should I do? Rebbe sent back word, go and whisper to her that it is Yom Kippur, and this may help relieve the craving. They whispered to her, and the craving subsided. She knew it was Yom Kippur, that's why she asked. But they just whispered in her ear, it's Yom Kippur, it's Yom Kippur, it's Yom Kippur, it's Yom Kippur. And somehow the craving went down. And Rebbe understood this to mean that that baby in her womb would be special. He would be some kind of special person who would be drawn to Torah in a way beyond the average person. And of course, it turned out to be true. Rabbi Yochanan was raised by his grandfather and quickly showed brilliance and a desire to learn Torah. And so he was enrolled in Rebbe's Torah Academy at a very young age. At the beginning, he sat in the 17th row, and he watched as the guy in the front, the sort of star pupil in the academy, Rav, would debate back and forth with Rebbe on Torah matters, and Yochanan in the back row had no idea what they were talking about. It was too complicated, it was over his head, but he kept coming. He wanted to understand badly, and within just a few years, he was up there in the front row and recognized by Rebbe and all his colleagues as a brilliant, brilliant young Torah scholar. Besides Rebbe, almost all the elder sages of that generation could be counted as Rabbi Yochanan's teachers, including Rabban Gamliel III and Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya I, who were Rebbe's son and grandson and successors as the Nasi, the head of the Torah Academy, the head of the Jewish people, really. The Nasi is the sort of the Torah scholar at the head of the Jewish people. You could think of it as the chief rabbi of the land. Other teachers included Bar Kapara, Rabbi Chaya and his son Chizkiah, Rav, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, Rabbi Shimon Yehotzadak, and many others. And in the whole of the Talmud, we do not find a sage who quotes so many of his predecessors as does Rabbi Yochanan. So he was not only brilliant and able to do the analysis, his memory was absolutely vast, and he learned all these teachings, not just what the law was, but who said it, and in debate with whom. And whenever he would transmit a teaching to his students, he was always meticulous to name the person that he heard it from or that it was recited in the name of. His primary teachers were Rabbi Oshaya the Great, who established the yeshiva in Caesarea, and Rabbi Yanai, who headed the yeshiva in Achbaria, and Rabbi Hanina, who succeeded Rebbe as the Rosh Yeshiva in Tzipori. But eventually, Rabbi Yochanan created his own yeshiva in Tiberias. And he became one of the leaders of the generation. He would say about himself, once he became established as this kind of an important scholar, that I hold myself to a different standard than the average person. The average person should learn Torah on a regular basis, and he should also work and make a living and perform his other functions. But if someone like myself, Rabbi Yochanan, would walk as little as 4 cubits without studying Torah and without wearing tefillin, that would be a desecration of God's name. He was basically always learning, always studying, always learning, always studying, always teaching, always involved in matters of Torah. Rabbi Yochanan came from a wealthy family. He inherited a large estate from his ancestors, complete with fields and vineyards. But one by one, he sold off all those fields and vineyards. He just wasn't interested in being rich or having a life of luxury or running all these fields and estates. He just sold them off as needed to support himself at a very meager level so that he could study and teach Torah all day long. His wisdom and knowledge became so vast and encyclopedic that he was considered an expert not only in Torah per se, but also astronomy, medicine, and zoology. He once used his medical knowledge to heal his student, Rabbi Abahu, and his spiritual gifts to heal several other students simply by holding their hands. There was a time when he himself was sick, and he went to a Roman noblewoman and asked her to heal him and to teach him how to heal the particular malady that he had. Eventually, she agreed to teach him, and so she healed him and taught him how to do that healing. And the knowledge that she possessed, it was scientific knowledge, and it was rare. It was something very few people knew about. He could have used that knowledge, taken it back to his community, and made a lot of money with it. What did Rabbi Yochanan do? As soon as he was healed, he went to his school, he gave a lecture, and he shared with everybody how that kind of healing was performed. When the noblewoman heard that Rabbi Yochanan publicized the cure for free Even though he could have used it to earn money, she was so impressed that she promptly converted to Judaism. When Rabbi Yochanan would roll up his sleeve, the room would light up with the glow of his skin. He was considered to be a human so beautiful that everybody's eyes would just automatically be drawn to him. He had great charisma and brilliance, as we've been talking about, but he was physically beautiful, like so handsome that he was beautiful. There's a passage in Tractate Bava Metzi on page 8, daf 84, and he says, "He who desires to get an idea of Rabbi Yochanan's beauty, let him take a silver goblet as it emerges from the crucible of the silversmith while it is still glowing from the fire, fill it with the seeds of a red pomegranate, and circle its brim with a crown of red roses, and place it between the sun and the shade, and its lustrous glow is akin to Rabbi Yochanan's beauty." Even this quality was something that he used for others and for Torah. He was never vain about his appearance, but he was also wise enough to acknowledge it. He didn't say, "No, I'm not so handsome." He knew that he was beautiful. So what would he do? He would sit and learn and teach near the women's mikvah, so that when women would emerge from the mikvah, right, because they're emerging from the time of the month when they and their husbands are not permitted to each other, and so they're going home for like date night with their husbands, and they would see him as they came out, and they would see such a beautiful man, so learned in Torah, and they would have that image in their minds when they came home to their husbands, and it would lead them and their husbands to have children who were handsome and dedicated to Torah, using his good looks for that kind of purpose. It was a very beautiful idea. He was also a very large man and a very strong man. Imagine this, you got to get that picture, right? Like a football player, but so handsome that he was considered beautiful. It's a real, unique individual. When he was sort of starting out and thinking about whether he would create his own academy or not, whether he would have a full-time career as a scholar, he was so poor, or I guess this was later because he came from a rich, so maybe what happened was, it was when he'd already given away so much of his fields and he had become so poor. Right, so that's what happened. So he kind of just sold everything, had become very poor as a full-time Torah scholar, and it was getting ridiculous. So he and his friend, Ilfa, decided, you know what, let's undertake a business venture to earn some money and fulfill in ourselves the verse that states, "But among you there will be no one that is poor." That's in Deuteronomy 15:4. So they set out in the course of the journey. They stopped and they sat down to have lunch, and they were near a wall that was pretty rickety. And Rabbi Yochanan overheard two angels talking. One angel said to the other, "Look at these two clowns. They're Torah scholars. They could be spending all their time studying Torah with the great sages of the generation, and instead they're going to go out and do a business venture and make some money. Let's just topple this wall on them now. They don't deserve to live." And the other angel said, "Shush, don't be silly. One of these two, his moment is about to come. We are going to leave them alone." So Rabbi Yochanan heard that. He turns to his buddy Ilfa, and he says, "Did you hear what somebody just said?" And Ilfa's like, "What are you talking about?" He says, "You didn't hear that conversation?" "No, I don't know what you're talking about." So Rabbi Yochanan realized that that was for his ears, and that the angels must be talking about him. So he said, "You know what? I changed my mind. I'm just going to go back. I'm going to live poor, but I'm going to study Torah all the time." He went back, and within a few days, he had become appointed the head of the academy where he was teaching and learning then, and then he went over to Tiberias and started his own yeshiva. After the passing of both, well, I'm going to come back to that. Oh, yeah, here, okay. So even before Rabbi Yochanan established his yeshiva in Tiberias, Rav and Shmuel had become leaders and teachers of the Babylonian community. So Yochanan is in Israel, in the land of Israel, and specifically in the north, right, in Seppori and then in Tiberias. Over in Babylonia, right, which was at that time headed by the Persian Empire, the Babylonian Empire had long ended, right? Nebuchadnezzar had fallen and had become part of the Persian Empire, a Zoroastrian-led place. But that was really the center of civilization east of Rome, right? The two centers of world culture at that time, in the known world, China was sort of like out of the known world for these people. But in the known world, Rome was the Western center, and the Persians were the Eastern center, right? And so the Jewish community under the Zoroastrian kings of Persia, who were running the Babylonian lands, were more free to learn and teach and study than the scholars who were in Israel beneath the authority of the Roman Empire. So over on the Babylonian side, there were more Torah academies, bigger learning, more people doing it. And the heads over there were Rav and Shmuel. Rav was based in Surah. Shmuel's academy was in Nehardea. Rabbi Yochanan never went over there and met them, but the teachings would be brought back and forth between the two places by the rabbis who traveled, people like Ula. And so Rabbi Yochanan heard all these teachings of Rav and Shmuel. Rav was older, and so Rabbi Yochanan considered Rav to be his master. And remember, Rav had studied in Israel before he went back to Babylonia. And Shmuel was about the same age as Rabbi Yochanan, so Yochanan considered him to be a colleague. Eventually, Rav and Shmuel became, just the heads of everything over there. Eventually, they died, and when Rav and Shmuel died, by then, Rabbi Yochanan's academy in Tiberias was famous, and he came to be considered the Torah authority of both places for his generation. And he ended up living so long and being the head of his academy in Tiberias for 80 years. He was the Rosh Yeshiva for 80 years. He was not the Nasi. The Nasi was a descendant of King David, right? Descendant of Rebbe, who was a Nasi in his time, etc. There was a Nasi during Rabbi Yochanan's time, but that family would defer in all Torah matters to Rabbi Yochanan. He was the chief rabbi of the world in his generations. Okay. And so Rabbi Yochanan has thousands of rulings and teachings in the Talmud, both in halach, in legal matters and sort of folk wisdom matters. And so here's a couple, just a few teachings to give you a sense of Rabbi Yochanan's voice. Fortunate is the person who grew in the Torah and whose toil is in the Torah and who gives pleasure to his Creator and who grew up with a good reputation and who departed from the world with a good reputation. That's Brachas 17a. The Holy One, blessed is He, saw that the righteous were few. He therefore planted a few of them in each and every generation. Right? So Rabbi Yochanan says we can count on the fact that even though there's very few righteous people in all the universe throughout all time, at least they haven't been concentrated in one generation so that other generations would have no righteous people in them. In every generation, there are righteous people. If a teacher resembles an angel of Hashem, master of legions, i.e., if a teacher has a sterling character, then people should seek Torah instruction from his mouth. But if not, then they should not seek Torah from his mouth. So he's saying that a teacher, a Torah scholar, has to walk the walk. No matter how great his learning is, if he doesn't behave properly, you're going to have to mistrust his teachings. He also said, so we have a little prayer that we read every day in the prayer book. If you pray every day from a Jewish prayer book, then you will recognize this from the morning prayers. He is the one who said, right at the conclusion of the daily blessing recited before studying Torah. Please sweeten, Hashem our God, the words of your Torah in our mouths and in the mouths of your nation, the house of Israel. And may our offspring and the offspring of your nation, the house of Israel, all of us, be of those who know your name and who occupy themselves with your Torah. Blessed are you, Hashem, who teaches Torah to his nation, Israel. We read that every day, and it's Rabbi Yochanan who wrote it. Rabbi Yochanan's teachings are to be found throughout the entire Babylonian Talmud, with his name appearing there some 1,700 times. However, an equally important contribution by Rabbi Yochanan to the oral law was the creation of the Jerusalem Talmud. For a period of about 150 years, roughly 5 generations of Amoraim flourished in the Galilee, the northern part of the land of Israel, and the dominant figure was Rabbi Yochanan. And so crucial was his role in the compilation of the Jerusalem Talmud that Rambam, Maimonides, refers to him as its author. Even though for about 60 to 70 years after Rabbi Yochanan's death, the project continued without him. He's still considered by Rambam to be the author of the Jerusalem Talmud. Rabbi Yochanan also was known in a time when people, there's a class system and people could be very rude to their servants, to their slaves. Rabbi Yochanan would have none of that, and he always acted kindly toward his servants, and every type of food that he ate, he made sure to share with his servants as well. And in addition, he would stand up in respect before all elderly men, even idol-worshipping non-Jews. And he explained, these people have experienced so much. They have had many experiences and difficulties throughout their lifetime. They must have seen many miracles and wonders, and this alone is reason enough to stand in their honor. That used to be the most obvious, common point of manners in all cultures in the world, right? If an elderly person walked into the room, you'd stand up. People have lost that sense of good manners, and it goes, all the way back here to Rabbi Yochanan. Of course, people would stand for their teachers, but he would stand for any elderly person in deference to what they had seen and known and learned and done in their long lifetimes. So we learned in today's daf, and we're going to come back at the end of this talk about Rabbi Yochanan, that his great friend and partner in learning was Reish Lakish. How did they meet? At the time that they met, Reish Lakish was not a Torah scholar. He was not a rabbi. He was, in fact, a bandit. One day, Rabbi Yochanan was swimming in the Jordan River. Reish Lakish, who was then a bandit and had yet to observe the Torah, saw him and jumped into the Jordan after him, since from afar Rabbi Yochanan, who had no beard, appeared to be a beautiful woman. Rabbi Yochanan beheld this display of energy, right, that Reish Lakish jumped into the river from the far side and came swimming across like a strong current. And it was like this incredibly strong guy with big energy going, after a goal, and said to him, your strength belongs to the Torah. Reish Lakish retorted, well, your beauty belongs to women. Rabbi Yochanan said to him, if you will repent your ways, I will give you my sister, who is even more beautiful than me, as a wife. Reish Lakish accepted this condition. It's like Reish Lakish was sort of, perhaps he had already started to realize that a life of being a bandit is not any way to go through this world. And maybe he was looking for something new, and now he meets this Torah scholar who senses something in him, believes in him, and said, I'll introduce you to my sister, and maybe this is going to work out. And that is what happened. Rabbi Yochanan's sister ended up marrying Reish Lakish, and Reish Lakish became Yochanan's brother-in-law. In the beginning, Reish Lakish, like Rabbi Akiva, who started learning late in life, he started with the basics, learning the alphabet, learning the Bible, eventually learning more of the oral law, and Reish Lakish turned out to be, as Rabbi Yochanan sensed, a genius. And they learned and learned and learned together, and for many, many years, they would learn together, take a law, ask a question, turn it over, understand the ins and outs. And Rabbi Yochanan, who was the greatest mind of his generation, could find no one to challenge him in matters of Torah as much as Reish Lakish, and so appreciated him dearly. At the very end of their time together, decades later, they unfortunately had a falling out. Rabbi Yochanan felt that Reish Lakish had disrespected him, and it maybe just misunderstood, but he sort of tossed back the insult. They were arguing about whether a knife is capable of contracting impurity. Is it when the last time that it gets hammered and it is a finished knife, even though it's still hot, or does it have to go into the water and go, tss, and it's tempered steel, and that's when the knife is really finished, and it's only from that moment that it can contract ritual impurity. They argued about this. Then Rabbi Yochanan felt that Reish Lakish had insulted him, and then he insulted him back and said, well, I guess the man knows the tools of his trade, referring to the fact that Reish Lakish had been a bandit before he became such an important rabbi in that generation. Reish Lakish was really insulted by that, and they ended up fighting, and it didn't go well. And it was almost like when they were pulled apart, it was like too much for them to bear, and Reish Lakish died. Some say that it was like the anger of Rabbi Yochanan being focused on one person, and we've learned elsewhere that you don't want to have a sage angry at you because his look kills. He doesn't even have to curse you, just that his anger at you will make you fall out of favor with the heavenly host, as it were. And at any rate, Reish Lakish died. And Rabbi Yochanan was never the same. I mean, he was already a very old man, but it's like he lost his zest for learning. And for 3 years, he just didn't learn anything. He didn't do anything. And all the other sages of the generation were like, when's he going to come back? When's he going to come back to the academy? We got to get him teaching again. We need his wisdom. They sent sort of the next greatest guy in the generation, Rabbi Elazar, to talk to Rabbi Yochanan, to try to get him interested in learning and teaching again. But when Rabbi Elazar started learning with Rabbi Yochanan, to everything that Rabbi Yochanan would say, Rabbi Elazar told him, oh yes, we learned a baraisa, a teaching that supports what you just said. Rabbi Yochanan eventually said to him, you are supposed to be like Reish Lakish? With Reish Lakish, whenever I would say something, he would pose 24 difficulties for me, and I would have to work hard to come up with 24 solutions to the 24 challenges that he gave to me. But with you, you just tell me I'm right. That's not learning. That's not what I need. That doesn't inspire me. And he cried out, where are you, Reish Lakish? Why did I lose you? Where are you, Reish Lakish? Ultimately, Rabbi Yochanan's sanity became unstable. The rabbis prayed for mercy on him, and Rabbi Yochanan passed away. Rabbi Yochanan had previously declared that upon his death, he would save the renegade sage Elisha ben Avuya, known as Acher. So there was another sage in the previous generation who was a friend of Akiva and Ben Azai. There's a story of 4 who entered Gan Eden, 4 who were pursuing the mystical secrets of the universe. 4 went into that world, like they were learning together, and they managed to sort of go up into the higher world. And they had 4 different outcomes. Rabbi Akiva went in peace and returned in peace. One of them went up there, was exposed to those mystical secrets, and went insane. Another one went up there, was exposed to those mystical secrets, and died. And the 4th, Elisha ben Avuya, was exposed to those mystical secrets, came back, and went bad. He went bad. And he, who was a gifted Torah scholar and one of the prides of the Jewish people, ended up working with the Romans to persecute the Jewish people. And no one could understand how he had gone so wrong. At another day, we'll talk more about the story of Elisha ben Avuya, who they stopped even saying his name. They would just call him Acher, the other one. And after he died, he was buried, and smoke miraculously came out of his grave. Didn't stop for years. Smoke, a little column of smoke, would emerge from Acher's grave. And people understood that because of his sins, he was being punished in Gehenna, which is a kind of purgatory where his soul was being refined. It was actually a blessing, given how much wrong he had done to the Jewish people, that his soul wasn't simply destroyed, but instead it was being refined. And for generations, for a long time, that smoke was coming out of his grave. And Rabbi Yochanan had mercy on him. And he said, I think he suffered enough. And when I die, I'm going to go pull Acher out of Gehenna, out of purgatory, and take him with me to the world to come. He's pretty confident. And in fact, when Rabbi Yochanan died, that miraculous column of smoke that had been emerging from Acher's grave for so many years stopped. And everyone understood that he had gone to Gehenna, found the soul of Acher, and brought him with him up to the heavenly academy. He had been punished enough for the wrongs that he did. And that is the story of Rabbi Yochanan. So, to answer the question, which we started with tonight from our daf, page 71 in Tractate Shabbos, if a person ate in one lapse of awareness, but on separate occasions, 2 pieces of forbidden fat, right? 2 pieces of the cow that you're not allowed to eat. It was in the same lapse of awareness. He didn't realize, I ate that, I shouldn't have eaten that, and then did it again. But rather, he ate 2 pieces, and it was in the same period of forgetting the law or of not knowing that those pieces of meat were forbidden. For whatever the reason, it was in the same lapse of awareness. And then later, he realizes that the first piece that he ate was forbidden. And then later still, he realizes that the second piece was forbidden. Rabbi Yochanan says he brings 2 sin offerings. He's liable to bring 2 sin offerings for the 2 pieces that he ate. And Reish Lakish says he brings 1 sin offering for both pieces. And we ask perhaps what's between them is that in between realizing that the first piece was forbidden, that he then designates the animal that he's going to bring as the sin offering in the temple, and that's why he needs to bring 2, because he designates in between the 2 realizations, and that's why he needs to bring 2. Or perhaps he realizes that the first thing that he ate was forbidden, he designates an animal, he brings the animal as a sin offering in the Holy Temple, and then he realizes that the second piece that he ate in that same lapse of awareness was also forbidden. That's why he owes a second offering. And whereas Reish Lakish says, no, just 1 sin offering will do, since both pieces were eaten in the same lapse of awareness. Whom does the law follow? What is the situation? And the answer is, the law follows Rabbi Yochanan. In disputes between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, if we have no other evidence to bring, the law follows Rabbi Yochanan. And it doesn't matter if he designated an animal in between the 2 realizations, or if he even brought the offering between the 2 realizations. If the realizations were separate, he brings 2 sin offerings. And now that we know a little bit more about Rabbi Yochanan and the kind of positivity and piety which characterized him, we can see that this is not because he wants to impose a burden on people, that, it was like he ate 2 pieces of forbidden flesh during 1 lapse of awareness. He just realized it at different times. Why would he have to bring 2 different sin offerings? And you can imagine the way Rabbi Yochanan is approaching this. He says, well, when he realized he did something wrong, he's like, oh man, I did something wrong. I got to make up for it. And then later, he realized he did something else wrong. And he goes through that same process. I got to make up for it. And by making him liable to bring 2 different sin offerings, he enables that person to go through 2 separate processes of atonement and teshuvah. And that's not a burden. That's an opportunity. This is a guy who's so much about the people and about being good to people and sharing his food with his servants. He's not going to impose burdens on people. He's saying that the opportunity to realize you've done wrong and to go through a process of atonement for it and to come out the other side feeling whole and refreshed and cleansed before the Lord your God is an opportunity. And if you had two separate realizations, you've got two opportunities to go through that atonement. God bless Rabbi Yochanan. May we all learn from his example to be inspired by him. And we're going to keep hearing about Rabbi Yochanan all the time as we go through our journey of Daf Yomi, make our journey through the 2,711 pages of the Talmud. And as we learned today, we're going to encounter Rabbi Yochanan's teachings 1,700 times in the Babylonian Talmud. And this is from the author of the Jerusalem Talmud. That is what I've got for us today. Let me see if there are any comments that I should take a look at. Lynn says, thanks, I missed a few minutes. Is Rabbi Yochanan the one who claimed descent from Joseph as regards his beauty? Yes, very good, Lynn, that's right. Rabbi Yochanan was descended from Joseph. He was of the tribe of Joseph, and I'm not sure if it's through Joseph's son Ephraim or Menashe, but yes, descended from Joseph, who was also incredibly handsome, and that's why so many things went well for Joseph in his story when he descended into Egypt. Melissa Beineman says about Reish Lakish, another accidental Talmudist. Yeah, very good. Marianne Baddeley is greetings from UK. Jean Tipnar-Lander says, thanks for the teaching, and so does Chris Carson. Keith Feldman is in the house from South Africa. Great to see you. Kathleen Pepe Southern from North Carolina. And Likat Aliawan, it says, good radio listeners club of Pakistan in Sheikhupura. Great to have you all here, my holy brothers and sisters, and I hope you enjoyed learning about Rabbi Yochanan. All the best, and God willing, we'll meet again tomorrow to discuss page 72 in Tractate Shabbos.